Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Mark Sebastian, COO of Option Pit, to discuss trends in Vol Q as the market digests positive COVID-19 vaccination news out of Moderna. Mark, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And it's certainly great news to hear on a Monday where cases have been soaring in the US, how well the Moderna vaccination is going. So how is Vol Q responding to the news? Because while Moderna is a Nasdaq 100 stock, it impacts the others within the index that are part of the work from home, work from anywhere trade.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vol Q relative to other volatility index have been relatively firm because the Nasdaq 100 is heavy on biotech, but it also is somewhat heavy on the stay-at-home trade, which is ordering from Amazon, ordering from, using Walmart, using Facebook to keep in contact with people, names like Zoom. So the stay-at-home trade is coming off, which is boosting a lot of, less traditional NASDAQ stocks, the industrials, airlines, hotels, and is really causing technology to be a little bit soft today. The NASDAQ 100 itself is essentially flat on the day, while the S&P 500 is up, over 0.5%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which only has 2 NASDAQ stocks and is a lot weaker in its NASDAQ holdings, is up over 1%. So Vol Q is a little bit firmer than one might expect if one was just looking at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, because you have to look deeper and dig a little deeper into what's going on with that index and the NASDAQ 100 itself.
So Mark, has Vol Q largely performed as expected following the U.S. national election? Because that's really what our conversation has been about, whether it's Vol Q or any other volatility indexes, how it had the significant elevation up into the election and then the expectation it was going to come off following. Has it largely been the pattern you've noticed?
Yeah, what's interesting is, Vol Q, because its straddle prices also really does tie well to those top 10 names in the NASDAQ 100. So what you're going to see in Vol Q in particular is a big bid into NASDAQ 100 earnings, that crazy earnings week when Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and AMD all report at the same time, Microsoft. That's actually been when we've seen the Vol Q at its highest. It did come off the election when we had that big election relief rally. What I think, again, is going to be interesting is, what does Vol Q do as the stay-at-home trade comes off and the industrials outpace the Vol Q itself? One spread I'm watching is, how do VIX and Vol Q interact with each other? I think that is going to be a really important spread to watch. How do those two interact? And is Vol Q going to stay bid while the VIX backs off? And vice versa if we have, let's say, a setback in vaccine news.
And it's so interesting. That was going to be my follow-up question to you, because hypothetically, with the bifurcation that we've seen in trading, as you had mentioned, VIX could come in nicely. And because Vol Q, now that we're paying attention to it day to day and week to week, could have a very inverse reaction to it. Because in past, we've really been talking about stocks relative to what the VIX is doing, but now you could be looking at volatility in a different way.
Yeah, if I think a really interesting trade, because let's face it, right? Those big stocks in the Nasdaq 100, if I'm looking out 10 years, those are names I want to own. But an interesting trade near term, if I was long a lot of those names, and let's face it, if you're carrying SPY or you're carrying Triple Q or both of those, you are essentially long a lot of the Nasdaq 100. The top 5 names in the S&P 500 are the exact same top 5 names in the NASDAQ 100, and those top 5 names are about a quarter of the S&P 500. So an interesting trade would be long a future in VLQ, which is the underlying future for Vol Q that trades over on the CME, and versus a portfolio of Triple Q and even a SPY. I'd be interested to see whether Vol Q does a better job hedging SPY risk over the next 3 to 6 months than the VIX future does itself, which is, I think, indicative of how heavy the S&P 500 has become in Triple Q names.
Just put a paper trade on that just to watch it and be able to back test and track it a little bit. Mark, great stuff as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.